Thank you, Keith. Keith asked us to acknowledge the various people involved with our work. There was a whole slew of people involved with this project right from the inception, and I won't go through them, but they're listed there. I'll talk about 4 topics in the time allotted to me. My talk is about a tool that we developed called the Mountain Pine Beetle Decision Support Tool. I'll just refer to it as the DST because it's less syllables. So I'll provide some context within which the DST was developed. I want to talk a little bit about some of the initial objectives of the DST and what the implications were for the kinds of knowledge that we require if we wanted to meet those objectives. I'll give you a quickie little overview of what the DST is, what it does, what it looks like. And I'll talk about ongoing development initiatives that are currently going on. So in terms of context for the DST and what we were faced, you've heard this morning already several examples of what I've called the problem of scale. And when we're talking about not only the beetle dynamics, but more importantly from the perspective of the DST, the dynamics of vegetation and particularly timber, there's a range of scales that we need to address. And so that could include either tree level, stand level, or landscape level. Most people know that in terms of MPB effects, they're most dramatically seen and evident at the landscape level. And so you can see that if you found yourself in the middle of this stand here, and that's the only piece of information you had, you may think the sky is falling, MPB is 1, let's pack up our cards and go home. And in fact, if you're at the landscape level in this situation, that may in fact be the situation. But in this case, if you were backing away from the stand level to the landscape level, the question and the picture changes dramatically. And so it's really important from a management perspective, most of our decisions are being made or directed by landscape level issues and states of knowledge, whereas your particular situation, if you're at the stand level, could be quite different. So like I said, from a management perspective, most of the decisions, whether they're in terms of MPB control or management responses to MPB levels of infestation, are occurring at the landscape level. So again, if you were in this situation, a management control prescription might be that you would deem single tree control to be effective, whereas in this kind of situation, obviously it would not be. So in terms of the beetle dynamics itself, which Ted just talked about, in the absence of major inflights, I think I would hypothesize that most of the beetle dynamics are operating at the tree or stand level in terms of tree to tree or subsequently stand to stand spread. So already we're starting to see this dichotomy between the management planning framework being more focused at the landscape level, whereas the MPB dynamics being operating more at the tree and stand level. So in order to bridge this link, what do we need to know? In terms of stand level, we need some information on MPB infestation and spread rates. And more importantly, from the DST perspective, we need some information on the stand vegetation development responses to different levels of MPB infestation at the stand level. And that's where the DST tool comes in. It was really designed to try to be able to give the practitioner some forecasting ability at the stand level under various different scenarios. So what's the DST objective? Well, I'll just read it. The objective of the DST was to project stand conditions, so that's more from a timber perspective, under a range of MPB-induced mortality, secondary stand structure, and regeneration scenarios. So three major pieces: mortality, what is the structures of the stand, and what are the regeneration responses that might be anticipated there. So what do we need to know to be able to address each of those pieces. Well, in terms of mortality patterns, we need some information at the stand level about how MPB kills trees and stands, and how those mortality trends progress through the stand over time. In terms of secondary stand structure, we need to know, is there in fact any secondary stand structure in those stands? By that I mean, are there overstory and understory structures to the stand? Are there species composition differences in the stand in terms of pure pine versus ancillary species? So are we dealing with mixed species stands or pure stands? Are we dealing with multi-level stands or single layer stands? And in each of those conditions, what is the growth response after MPB kill of each of those components? So if there happens to be an understory of balsam fir that's unaffected by MPB in terms of mortality, what is its response to in terms of growth mortality after the MPB incident? And in terms of regeneration, and this is where my question to Anne came before, what level of PL or lodgepole pine or jack pine regeneration can be expected under not only various levels of MPB attack, but also various scenarios of management response, whether there's salvaging or not going on. And if there is a regeneration event or pulse, how does that, from a growth perspective, how does that interact with the remnants of the stand in terms of future growth and mortality of that pulse of regeneration? So, what is the MPB DST? The MPB DST is a tool that enables practitioners to do stand level projections, and I'm calling it an integration tool because it's intermediary between management expectations of in terms of developing landscape level plans. These landscape level plans, as Ted talked about, require some knowledge at the stand level. Especially, I'm not sure how dynamic Ted's tool was in terms of yield, but if there's a desire to incorporate any kinds of yield effects into landscape level plans, we need the ability at the stand level to project those effects. To be able to do the stand level projections, we need some knowledge about some inputs, and I've talked a little bit about what those are. Some knowledge about MPB kill and how it affects stands. Some knowledge about regeneration after the MPB incident for different kinds of stand structures. Some knowledge about what are the stand structures that we're trying to project, and also some knowledge about the shelf life of the remnant stand. When developing the tool, we've had to make a whole bunch of assumptions around what these inputs are, and we've based them to our best knowledge of what the current state of knowledge and abilities are. Now, this room is filled with people that are doing a whole series of ancillary research projects that over time will add more information to the kinds of inputs that we require. And so that's why I've called this an integration tool, because it's sort of strategically placed to be able to take advantage and capitalize on whatever research knowledge we receive over the next little while, and being able to integrate those through this tool to assist in landscape level planning. So just a little bit about what the tool actually does. The tool, it's basically a simulation tool based on one of two growth engines, either the SRD Gypsy growth model or the mixed wood growth model MGM currently being developed at U of A. The user is given the ability to enter in a bunch of user inputs, and those are captured by these 4 circles. User can specify different levels of beetle kill, and those are simulated as single pulse events, not occurring over time. The user is given some latitude in terms of being able to specify the kinds of stands for which they want simulations done, in terms of vegetation strata, stand structure, and stand age. There are a limited suite of management interventions that are possible in terms of natural regeneration, planting, site preparation. And the user can either turn on or turn off salvage. The model then takes all those inputs, runs them through one of the models, and does 100-year projections of stand level mensurational attributes and kicks those out as growth projections. So what does it look like? The application is a web-based application. For those who may be interested in gaming with the tool, they can contact us or FGYA or FRI, the administrators of the tool currently. You'll be given a username and password, and that'll give you access to the web-based tool. This is just one of the input screens. It's actually really straightforward. The user is asked to specify the model that they want to use, what the vegetation stratum is that they want to project, what kind of stand structure is associated with that. And then over here, you specify the age class of the stands you're dealing with, the level of MPB infestation, and whether you would like to incorporate any stand management interventions in terms of salvage or supplemental planting or site prep after salvage. DST Output consists of a series of tabular and graphical outputs. We track stand responses by up to 3 layers, so the overstory layer, the understory layer, or the regeneration layer. And within each of those layers, we track individually by species, and we report species mean height, species basal area, species merchantable volume, and species density over time for a 100-year projection period. And as well, there's graphical output for each of those response variables that I just mentioned for the mensurational attributes. And as well, the DST tracks some wood quality attributes, number of standing dead trees over time, so it recognizes actual physical fall down of trees over time. And then of those trees that are killed, the proportion and number that are displaying checks, sap rot, or wood borer damage. And these trends are all based on published information out of BC, and I'll address that a little bit in a few minutes. That's a quickie overview of what the tool, where the tool came from, what it does, who the intended audience of users is. There's ongoing development going on, and I'll talk a little bit about some of the current shortcomings of the tool and what we're doing to address them. So during the development phase of the tool, there was a user group identified and given a chance to provide feedback after an initial round of gaming with the tool. And there was an online response facility that we used to track user feedback. We ran several user feedback workshops, largely with industry and some SRD involvement, to try to give us impressions and identify shortcomings. From that, an enhancement plan was developed, and over the course of the past year, we've been chipping away at components of that enhancement plan. So one of the first things that we're trying to address is the suite of stand types that the tool is capable to address. And currently there are no either white spruce or balsam fir understories in the suite of stands that the tool forecasts, which is, from an industry perspective, a fairly major shortcoming, because if there are, the thinking is that in the event that there are those existing understories in stands with secondary structure, even in the absence of salvage operations after pine beetle, there's a potential for that secondary structure to actually develop into something potentially merchantable over time. And so we really need to be able to try to incorporate those stand structures to look what they will look like, or to project what they will look like over time in the event of beetle kill. As well, there's currently a fairly limited suite of starting conditions, what we're calling starting conditions, in terms of stand densities, ages, and heights of the target stands that the user wants to project. And there's currently no ability to customize those. The user is sort of forced into some fairly discrete boxes in terms of what conditions are available. So to address that, we've expanded the scope of the data that was used to specify starting conditions. Initially, we had limited ourselves just to the FGYA PSPs that were identified for monitoring for beetle kill and the effects of beetle kill. We've now thrown the gate wide open and are looking at PSPs, actual operational PSPs from all the companies involved in the project. And we're currently developing a new suite of stand types and starting conditions that will be incorporated into the model. Currently, in terms of natural regeneration, in the absence of salvage, the assumption of the model is that there will be no regeneration of pine or anything else. So that's likely a very conservative estimate, but the estimate in the initial development of the model was based on experience documented in BC. The feeling is among some practitioners that over longer time frames, in a 10 to 20 year time frame, there may in fact be the opportunity for some natural regeneration in the absence of salvage. And so we don't have any further information about that, but we'll be looking to people like Ann and Ellen for information over time as it comes through. Shelf life. Currently, there's some fairly simplistic assumptions about shelf life of standing trees following pine beetle attack. These are all based on some very preliminary reports that were published in BC. I know Kathy Lewis is working with the FRI on trying to corroborate some of those trends and seeing what the situation is in Alberta. So as those data and trends become available, we'll hopefully be able to incorporate those into the tool as well over time. Non-tree vegetation, currently the tool does not address non-tree vegetation, but the monitoring piece of this project is a monitoring what we used to call lesser veg, but that's not a political term now, the non-tree vegetation. And we're still not sure exactly how or if we might use that information, but it is being collected, and the opportunity is there to incorporate some of those, either from just a straight reporting perspective or from a cause and effect kind of perspective. Currently, like I pointed out before, there are only 4 discrete levels of MPB attack that are available: 0, 25, 50, and 100% kill, modeled as succinct one-time events. And there's a fairly strong feeling that experience in Alberta is showing that maybe on the order of 75 to 80% kill is a more representative descriptor of MPB incidents, and so we're working at incorporating that kind of a level into the modeling as well. Initially, as you can imagine, the growth and yield projection piece of the work was a fairly complex undertaking. We worked closely with SRD and Sean Ming Huang and his group in terms of revising the GYPSY model to be able to address discrete layers of stand structure, and we were pretty successful, we think, in doing that. GYPSY is ongoing further development as well, and as that changes, we'll be working to incorporate those into the model as well. So a couple of summary comments. What is the DST? It's a stand level projection tool for simulating post-MPB stand development. It's currently undergoing ongoing revisions to address some of the shortfalls in terms of projection capability and stand structure. I think it's a pretty exciting integrative tool that's strategically placed between management planning and research, and it's sort of a natural in my mind where research results can be integrated into stand level projections for subsequent use in landscape level effects. And it's been intentionally built to be fairly flexible, to be able to incorporate new knowledge and research as it arises. So hopefully we'll be able to do that as it occurs. I already spoke about this, its logical placement as an integrative tool.